So, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here with us tonight. My name is Lisa Salisbury, she, her pronouns, and I currently serve as the 13th director for the University of Idaho Women's Center. I'm coming to you tonight somewhat unexpectedly from the ancestral homelands of the Comanche, Wichita, Caddo, Tonkawa, and Anadarko peoples, now known as Dallas, Texas. The University of Idaho's Moscow campus, where I usually am, is located on the ancestral homelands of the Nimiipuu, Palouse, and Stichuamsh peoples. We extend gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who call this place home since time immemorial. University of Idaho recognizes that it's our academic responsibility to build relationships with Indigenous peoples to ensure the integrity of tribal voices. This year, the University of Idaho Women's Center is celebrating our 50th anniversary, and I am thrilled to have no less than 6 of the former directors here with us tonight to share their insights and their memories from their time at the center. And we have one who is joining the program as an attendee. So before I introduce our panelists, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the directors who couldn't be here. Sherry Register, who served from 1974 to 1975, Donna Granville, who served from 1976 to 1978, Betsy Thomas, who served from 1985 to 1997, and Susan Palmer, who served from 1997 to 1998. Sadly, all of these amazing women have passed away, but their legacy lives on in the vibrancy and the success of the center today. Carrie Galloway, who served from 2003 to 2004, is traveling, was not able to join us. And Celia Banks Forrest, who served from 1975 to 1976, is in our audience today. So welcome, Celia. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our 6 panelists, and I'll start with Jane. Jane Langenus was the very first director of the Women's Center. She served from its opening in 1972 until 1974. While she was director, she initiated the weekly Brown Bag Lunch series of speakers and discussions. Jane came to the university in 1969 as Assistant Dean of Students under Dean of Students Jean Hill. She was also part of the Women's Core Caucus that filed a discrimination lawsuit against the university with the EEOC and Idaho Human Rights Commission. Following her departure from the University of Idaho, Jane earned an MSW degree at the University of Washington. After a career in juvenile corrections and 20 years in private therapy practice, she retired in 2013 to Whidbey Island in Washington. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Lisa.
Donna Holt served as director of the Women's Center from 1978 to 1979. After her term at the Women's Center, she attended law school at the University of Idaho's College of Law. Following her graduation, Donna moved to Olympia, Washington, where she worked for the state of Washington, first at the state's Department of Personnel as an affirmative action officer, and then later as the personnel director for the State Department of Licensing. In 1989, Donna went into solo law practice, and for more than 30 years, she practiced employment law, including discrimination on the basis of sex, race, and disability. Her other areas of practice included wills, probate, and guardianships. Donna also served as the Thurston County Superior Mental Health Court Commissioner and taught in the paralegal program at South Puget Sound Community College. She's no longer in active practice, and she's been in the process of retiring for the last couple of years. Donna is an avid gardener and a dog rescue advocate in her spare time. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Elaine Pettyjohn was the director of the Women's Center from 1979 to 1985. She moved to Moscow in 1970 and spent several years teaching in the English department. A regular at the Women's Center when the director position opened in 1979, she says she jumped at the chance to apply. Jane spent the next 5 years as director, immersed in lunch programs, conference planning, and talking with students who needed to be heard. She and her wife, Maud, left Moscow in 1985 for Seattle, She started working as a paralegal for a large multi-state law firm, and 5 years later, she was made the Director of Human Resources. She retired in 2006 and started a small quilting business. She closed the business in 2012 and moved to Tacoma, Washington. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Valerie Russo served as director of the Women's Center from 1997 to 1998, and she was the Assistant Dean of Students for Training and Resources and the director of the Violence Prevention Programs Office at the University of Idaho. She co-wrote and managed the U of I's first 3 Department of Justice Violence Against Women grants, which the Women's Center still has today, focused on domestic violence and sexual assault prevention education and advocacy services for the U of I campus. Valerie is a life coach and licensed professional mental health counselor in the states of Washington and Idaho. She recently retired as Director of Counseling and Wellness and Clinical Assistant Professor at Washington State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. She enjoys cooking, baking, and her 2 Boston Terriers. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Jeannie Harvey holds a very special place in my heart as she was the Women's Center director who hired me. Jeannie served as the director from 1999 to 2002, and then again from 2004 until 2007. She's worked on women's and gender issues throughout her professional career. While at the Women's Center, she led the search for a permanent campus home for the center and grew the center staff significantly. After working at the Women's Center, Jeannie went on to serve as Senior Manager for Gender Integration with Interaction, a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit working with international development organizations. As a Gender Analyst for the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Foreign Ag Service, and as the Gender Specialist for the United States Agency for International Development's Bureau for Food Security, focusing on Asia and East and Southern Africa. Jeannie is now retired and lives in Moscow. Welcome, Jeannie.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here.
And Heather Shea served as the director from 2008 to 2013. Her career in student affairs spans over 2 decades at 5 different campuses and involves experiences in many different functional areas. She identifies as a student affairs generalist. Heather currently works as the director of the Office of Women and Gender Equity, WAGE, as the interim director of the Gender and Sexuality Campus Center, and is also affiliate faculty in the Student Affairs Administration MA program at Michigan State University. She's a transplant to the Midwest who grew up in Colorado. Heather is a divorced mother of 2 with 2 teenagers. Welcome, Heather.
Great to be here. Great to see you all.
So welcome to all of you, our panelists, those of us who are joining us in the audience. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So I have a few questions that I'm going to pose to each of our panelists directly, and then we'll move into some questions from our audience. So if you're watching tonight and you have a question that you'd like to ask, please type it into the Q&A box located in the menu bar at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we have time for. And so I would like to ask the panelists to mute your microphones unless I'm directing a question to you, so that we can avoid any interference from the background. And Jane, my first question is for you. So what were the job requirements for the director position when you were hired? And would you be willing to share your starting salary?
Well, the starting salary part's easy because I was an assistant dean of students already, and I didn't get any more money for being the director of the Women's Center. It just was added to my responsibilities as assistant dean of students. And the job requirements, again, I don't remember that there were any. I think I just was tapped because it was logical that I was the female assistant dean of students, and logical that I would be the director. So I don't remember formal job requirements, and I definitely didn't apply for the job. It was just given to me. But I willingly accepted it and was excited to be able to create this wonderful service for the women at the University of Idaho. I know that I remember scrounging around for furniture for the office, going to the surplus furniture place, wherever it was on campus. And the selection was pretty sad. I know we had beanbag chairs, and we had a lot of floor space that people would sit in during the brown bag lunches. So it wasn't fancy, but we made it homey and welcoming.
Thank you, Jane. Yes, I know those other duties as assigned, really.
Right.
They
Right.
gave you an entire position under that classification. Well, we all owe you a debt of gratitude for being willing to step up and step into that role, because it's thanks to you that the Women's Center was able to be launched and to start the trajectory of our history of service to the campus. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, Elaine, let's move to you next. So where was the Women's Center located during your tenure, and what were its physical attributes?
Well,
Whether
by the time I became Women's Center Director, the center had moved to what I think was a space that had been used by the architecture department. And it was a single-story wooden building that really did look like it was World War II vintage. But it was, I thought it was a wonderful space. There was a front door with a porch. You walk in and there was what I thought of as a huge lounge. It seemed that way when it was full of people. Lots and lots of those old pieces of furniture that Jane was referring to. They were there when I started as director, and I have no idea where they came from, but they were certainly well used. We had 2 offices. I had a very small office, as the subsequent directors will testify to. I think there was room for one additional chair that people could sit in that wanted to talk to me privately, and a desk and a small bookshelf. There was a second office that Corky Bush, who was the assistant dean for student affairs, used. That was her space, and she had her own responsibilities besides the Women's Center. And then there was a center space for the secretary. It was a very, very busy place those years, and we operated lots and lots of different programs out of that space. Corky she had the National Student Exchange Program as part of what her responsibilities were. So we had NSE students in and out all of the time. I tried very, very hard to make sure that this space was a safe space for women who came in, a space where they were welcomed, where they could just come in and plop into a chair. They didn't have to talk to anybody. They had no responsibilities except to be there and to feel comfortable. So those years that I was there in that space were busy, very, very busy, but they were also very, very happy years. And I have always felt very honored to have served in that position.
Thank you, Elaine. I just wanted to make a comment about the furniture. And I don't know, Jeannie and Heather, if you remember those wooden chairs that used to be in the Women's Center, the round ones with kind of the hooped back. We have found those in photographs dating back to 1972. So those those chairs were a legacy from Jane's time building the Women's Center with cast-offs from university surplus, and we had a little farewell party for them when we finally got rid of them a few years ago. Because
Well,
they were a piece of our history. I mean,
Yeah, they were all over. They were all over I think a lot of the academic departments, because when I was in the English department, I think practically every office in that department must have had a couple of those chairs. That's what our students sat in.
That's wonderful. It just tickled me that we still had those chairs after almost 50 years. They were still in the center. They were durable. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Elaine. I'm going to move next to Donna. So Donna, you were director for just a year. I'm interested to know, what was the level of support that you and the Women's Center received from the administration, from the campus community, and then also, what do you feel was lacking in that support?
Well, this is a hard question, partially because my memory fails frequently. But I came to the university with no knowledge of Idaho much at all, or the Women's Center. And the Women's Center was, as Elaine says, just a good, safe place for women and anybody who wanted to come by. My recollection is that the biggest mentor I had all of the time that I was there, and though it was for only a year, it was a busy year. Jenny Wolf was a physical education professor, as I recall. Elaine, that's correct? Mostly. Anyway, Jenny was probably the biggest advocate for making the Women's Center a healthy place, to keep it vital. And she was personally able to tell me that some of the things I was trying to accomplish were worthy. I had come from an academic background and university administration, not that involved with students. So it was an interesting combination of exposure to students and staff and faculty at University of Idaho. So Jenny helped me know that I was doing what at least she and I agreed were good things to happen with the center. The president at that time was Richard Gibb, who was a nice enough man. He was somewhat, he was a university president who was pretty impressed with being a university president, and he was not very supportive of my Women's Center. And I say my Women's Center because I differentiate it from every other Women's Center in the universe. I hope each of us has a sense of property over our Women's Center. But Dr. Gibb was very concerned that my Women's Center girls, he called the people who populated my center girls, that my girls were not behaving well. And I was summoned once to his office to talk about the girls. And I, being old enough to be able to assert myself, that I explained to him that they were not girls. He was not impressed. But he asked me to keep them, please, from doing things on the front porch that shouldn't be done in public. They did act out sometimes, and it was pretty wonderful. The howling at the moon was something that we were sort of proud of. So the community was interesting. We had all of the same pressures in our community in Moscow that we had, that you have now. Some of the things I've read about what's happening in Moscow, some of the same people are there still making the same noises. It's remarkable to me that some things have not changed. But the academic community, there were people in some of the departments that were so supportive. There was a man in physiology who was just great. he was helpful in helping learn about things that I didn't know about.
Donna, I think you're muted. I think Donna's muted.
Yeah, she is.
Uh-oh.
Uh,
Let me
Donna,
see what
can you hear-
happened there.
Yeah.
Hold on just a second. I seem to have muted everybody. I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourselves. Oops.
Okay, I'm unmuted, I
Okay.
think.
All right. I think you're
Alma.
unmuted now. So yes, if you
In
would go
any case,
ahead and mute
I have no
yourself
idea where
again.
I wandered off, but the community was, there were people in the community that were very, very helpful and supportive. The university learned that we were there. We did get publicity. We had people, women who came to the Women's Center who were involved with the Argonaut, which really was helpful because we got a lot of press. We got pictures, we got stories, and I think our Women's Center was given lots more press than we otherwise would have, and we had high attendance for lots of our programs. So I was happy with what we did during those times. So,
Yeah.
And I've lost everybody. I have no idea what's here.
Oh, no.
We can
That's-
see and hear you, which is
Yeah.
important, Donna.
That's
Um,
okay. I'm coming back. She says.
I've had many folks express fond memories, in particular of the brown bag programs that happened at the Women's Center, and the lively discussion that ensued, and those continued well into my time. We stopped doing those a few years ago because attendance was waning, but I think for many, many decades that was a key component of Women's Center programming, providing opportunities for people to gather and have conversations about important topics and issues that were concerning around women and gender issues at the time. So thank you so much for sharing those. And I apologize for inadvertently muting everybody. I don't know what I did. I just suddenly hit something and you were all silent. So I'll try and keep my hands away from the controls now. All right, let's see. Jeannie, I'm going to ask you the next question. What do you feel were your major accomplishments from your time as director?
Oh, I'm not muted. So I think there were several things that I think I was really glad that we were able to accomplish. The first thing was, in the very first year, I moved twice. We moved the Women's Center twice. And my biggest kind of goal was to find a permanent center, a center in Central Campus, and where it wouldn't be too far out. And I really wanted this building that was it was the restaurant that was in the center of campus. It was a 2-story little restaurant and stuff. Some of you probably remember it. I forget what it's called, the pantry or something like that, or the perch or something. I can't remember what it's called, but they anyway, I really wanted that, and we tried really hard. That the dean of architecture had more weight than I did, so he was able to kind of talk me into giving that one. But then we moved to Memorial Gym, and they did some alterations for that, and I think that was a pretty good move. So all in all, I think that worked out pretty well. Another one of the things that I was really proud of, and I had no knowledge of higher ed. When I first came, I didn't really understand how the process, how things worked. And I had some students were coming to me and they said, we want to take the Women's Studies minor. And I was looking in the catalog and I'm like, okay, like the required course was Intro to Women's Studies. So I said, I went to the sociology department or wherever it was. And I said, when is that course taught? And they said, it's never been taught. And so I was like, what? I didn't really understand why it had never been taught. and somebody said, well, it's funding. And so I said, well, how much does it cost? Or how much would it cost to pay somebody to do this? $3,000 or $1,500? I can't remember. And so I kind of got in trouble because I just sort of said, well, I'll pay for that. I'll find the Women's Center budget and we'll pay for it, you know? And so I got a visit from the provost, who came into the little Women's Center office, and he said, you know, this isn't quite how things are done here. He didn't, you know, provosts just don't drop in on you. And so anyway, so he said, this isn't how things are done. Anyway, I had a conversation with the dean, and finally it worked out. And then they said, would you want to teach it? You know, and stuff. So that we did. We offered it. We got the class going, and so that was really exciting. It was fun, but I felt kind of bad because I didn't really understand how higher ed worked, and I kind of got myself into trouble there. So, and a couple of Lisa said at the beginning that one of my goals was really to work on staffing, because what happened with the Women's Center, I think, is that it was they had a half-time director. I think the director was just not half-time, but sort of just during the academic year, and on the 9-month kind of contract, and that was the only permanent staff, and then other staff were kind of if the dean of students gave him money or something like that, that was good. But so my goal was really to try to figure out a way to make staffing more permanent, and the funds coming from sources that would be there forever. And I thank Jane and others that were so kind of had the foresight to kind of push this creation of, you know, a permanent position for the director position, because otherwise I don't think it would have been able to continue on. And one of my leave of absences that I took when I came back, Bruce Pittman, who's dean of students, said, you know, you're gonna he said I have good news for you, but you're not gonna like it. And he said, we've changed the positions to where it's 12 months, it's a permanent position, 12 months, and we're making the salary comparable to the other directors on campus, which was a huge deal. Wow. It was a huge deal because it wasn't, and I don't take credit for that because I didn't do it. It was actually an anonymous group or individual that, you know, kind of went forward and said, this you're not paying the director of the Women's Center equal to the other directors on campus. And so anyway, so I thank whoever was kind of the person who did that and stuff. And another staffing issue that became kind of evident to me at a certain point was that we really needed to have, we had so many staff and faculty and students coming to us who wanted to talk about gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender issues and stuff on campus. And so I said, we need a GLBT coordinator, you know, just a coordinator position, like Lisa's position was a coordinator position. And what I did is I ended up saving up some money, getting a little pot of money. And then I went to Bruce Pittman, the dean of students, and I said, Bruce, I got this great idea. We're gonna hire a GLBT coordinator. And he, bless his heart, he was totally supportive, but he said to me, he said, not now. Time isn't right. So I waited, and then all of a sudden I said to him, I kept going back to him, and I'm not exactly sure what happened. When at one point he said, okay, do it now. And I think it was because there was a bunch of chaos in the administration and stuff like that. And he thought that since they were worried about their chaos stuff, and he said, you know, okay, you better do it now. So we did. We created the job description. We did the search and stuff. And after we hired the person, Tim White, who was the president of the university at the time, he was holding one of his diversity sessions at his house. It was a reception for anyone who worked in diversity issues. And so I walked up to him and I said, Tim, I want you to meet the new GLBT coordinator. And he said, and I was really nervous because I knew he didn't know this position even existed. And I said, this is the first GLBT coordinator in the entire state of Idaho on any campus. And he said, that's fantastic. You know, and he puts it out his hand to shake her hand and stuff. So I was totally relieved, and stuff. So that was really great. And I'm so excited to see where that's gone. That's gone to some really good places and stuff. So, and then you mentioned Ginny Wolf. Well, we created the Virginia Woolf Service Awards, which continues to go on, and it's really it's a wonderful award, and it's a nice recognition of service to the community and stuff. So I like that. I'm glad that those are continuing. So, yeah, I think that's all I'll say. I think I talked too much, but yeah.
Never, Jean. It's wonderful to hear your memories, and we're still in the Memorial Gym, still there.
Yay.
Although the office that was your office, and then Heather's office, and then my office briefly, we put the wall back up, and we made it two offices again because we got the OVW grant from the Department of Justice and had a
great.
need for a private space for a confidential advocate, and so
Fantastic.
so now there are 4 private offices, but yeah, so
It was a big office too.
it was a big office, and
yeah.
it made 2 pretty small offices, but nice that all the career staff could have their own private space. And I think I know who actually advocated for your salary to be equal. I won't share though. But I will say that students were involved in that decision. And so I think that the fact that you had such strong support from the student body really speaks to the level of connection that you were able to create with our students at the time. Students have powerful voices, and they've made critical things happen on our campus, and that absolutely was something that needed to happen. So
It did.
I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Yeah, sure. It's my pleasure. Great to be here.
Let's see. So our next question is for Heather. Heather, what had you wanted to accomplish during your time as director of the Women's Center but weren't able to? And maybe you could speak a little bit to the impediments to some of those goals.
Yeah, that's such a great question. There is always a challenge when you're short on resources, short on staff, short on time, right? And I think I'm really proud of the things we were able to accomplish, but there are so many things that you can always do more, right? One of the things, it's ironic that everybody's been talking about getting it into the Memorial Gym. I think one of the things I really wanted to accomplish was moving it out of the Memorial Gym, and ideally into a new building, right? I think there was a lot of, at least energy right as I was leaving, to create some kind of center that would provide a space for intersectionality and conversation across multiple identities. So that, fundraising is always one of those challenges, I think. And the other area that I think I wish we could have accomplished, and I was reminded by Kay Keskinen of this, is that we had students from time to time who would come into the Women's Center expressing basic needs or emergency needs, or they lost funding or support because they came out to their parents, or their they needed gender affirming clothing, whatever the issue was. And so I think as time has gone on, I'm like, if we could have established some kind of sustainable source of student support to provide for emergency needs. Kay reminded me of a time where we had a student who'd moved to Idaho to take care of her grandmother, and a group of us pooled funds together to purchase a computer for her. And it's those types of big purchases that really make the difference between a student being able to continue to be successful. So, focusing on that student success initiative. I think as I reflect back on that time period, I think movements have come along, right? I mean, from 2013 to here, where we are now in 2022, I think focusing on the needs of women of color, on trans women, and others who are affected by gender-based oppression who aren't cisgender white women is something that, I kind of we were always thinking about and struggling with and thinking towards, but didn't really get accomplished while I was there. So I've been really pleased to see all the work that Lisa and her team have done in that regard. And really augmented, I think, relationships through that work. Institutional barriers, I think just the recent news about what University of Idaho employees are able or not able to say about abortion care is a great example of how a state context and environmental context can really restrict the ability for a forward-thinking, progressive space like a women's center to move the needle. My colleagues across the border at Washington State University, I was always jealous that they had, much more freedom in a lot of ways. And so I think the one story I'll tell is I remember getting a call from somebody in the governor's office who was responding to a complaint that our office was producing Eve Ensler's play, The Vagina Monologues. And they were worried about state funds going to, to fund this pornography or whatever they were calling it. But it was just a ridiculous statement because, once they start realizing more about what the play is about, but there was just such a, Idaho had this little pocket up in that little area, and yet they're in a really conservative state. I think the other challenge for accomplishing goals is always staff turnover and people moving on and out. And so really good people left the institution, collaborators, co-conspirators, folks who I think, sometimes it takes a group of people and it takes people from, other different pockets around the university. And I know when I left, I was like, I think I've done what I can do in this moment here, and have reflected a lot. And now that I'm directing a somewhat similar center, although we are just in our infancy in comparison, we were established in 2019. Really just think a lot about, what are the lessons that I learned during my time there? What would my mentors, like Kay, say? And then, how can I work with a supervisor, staff person who I'm close to, like Carmen Suarez, to really accomplish the kind of change? So those are some of the things that I would say that I would want to improve upon. Thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Heather. And
Lisa,
some of the, yeah.
this is Jeannie. Can I just
Hi.
recognize two people in the audience that did the Vagina Monologues, and that was one of the things I was going to talk about because it was a pretty kind of crazy thing. And I was like, we're going to do this. And Emily Sly and Lori Van Bugenum, who I see their names on here. I just want to say thank you for all the work you did. I still have the big poster, and I love what you did and the many years that you worked on that Vagina Monologue. So I really appreciate it very much. Anyway, sorry, I didn't want to take up more time, but
I will say one other thing about the Vagina Monologues. I was so inspired by my, our office's engagement and my role in particular that when I got to writing my dissertation for my PhD, I did a study of students' reflections upon their experience in engaging in the Vagina Monologues at a university in the Inland Northwest. So it was that was the subject of my dissertation. So yes, loved it.
Awesome. Oh, thank you, Jeannie, for giving Emily and Lori a shout out. Yeah. Memorable in our history, your activism, from, co-founding Flame to, helping to establish programs that continued for many, many years was, I'm thrilled that you're here in the audience tonight. Thanks for joining us. And I know we have other students, other former students who are involved with the Women's Center who are here as well. Valerie, would you like to share a little bit about who your mentors were during your time as director and anything that you would like to tell us about them and their influence on your work.
Well, it's interesting because I had just moved to Idaho from Central California. So I had just got to Idaho like in February, and by August, I was working at the Women's Center as the sexual assault coordinator as a part-time position. So I came in with the focus of safety issues. So I didn't know anybody. And so I started with what I do best, which is connecting and trying to figure out local resources, community resources, regional resources, and national resources. So I'm not afraid to call up people. I don't really care what their title or their names are. If I think I need something, I'm just going to call and see what's up and see what we can do. So I began partnerships with the local law enforcement prosecutor's office. We began working with ATVP and Christine and developing the first domestic violence, sexual assault protocol for the county, started working with people in Boise. I went to a conference and met Alan Berkowitz, who I thought he was super cool. And he started reviewing some of the programming that we were doing and writing for campus. So I was getting connected nationally and trying to understand what was best practice in universities in 1995, 96, 97, what was happening, what was going on, how were reports being made. I took a student in 96 to the Oprah show and met Mary Koss, and so got connected that way. I realized that Christina Crawford lived near here, and so she came during Sexual Assault Awareness Week one year and did a book signing because her mom was Joan Crawford and she was the subject of Mommy Dearest. So she came and spoke at the Clothesline Project. And so I just really tried to bring our reach further out. So mentors was interesting because I just didn't know anybody. So I just kept reaching out to different people on campus. And Susan Palmer was definitely someone that helped me get connected. And by the time I was director for a little bit before Jeannie came in, I was really just immersed in all of the safety issues and trying to get the community and all of us on board to have some sort of cohesive way of treating men and women and anybody that came forward to report sexual assaults respectfully, and to be more receptive of the programming and the outreach that we were doing on campus. I mean, to date ourselves, we were taking a screen and a projector for overhead slides to fraternities and sororities. I mean, that's what going out and doing a program. So when I did 100 programs in a year, I'm filling up the back of my car with extension cords. And I mean, you had to be a little hefty to kind of drag all that stuff around. But just trying to get into all of the organizations on campus and to have a good positive voice and want people to continue to be treated in a way that they could come forward and we can get these things through the system. When I did move over to the Dean of Students office, we did spend a year working with Boise and the legislators and changed a piece of the rape law, which people said was not possible, which I never hear very kindly when someone says you can't do that. So we did it. And it's funny, Heather, what you were saying about the governor's office. I remember we were going down to do a program in Boise, and I don't even remember who the governor was at the time, but they called me and said, could you change the name of your program because the governor's wife is going to introduce your program and she doesn't want to say the word predator. So the name of the program was Through the Eye of the Predator. And I said, I think you should probably get someone else to introduce the program. So she decided she could say the word. So all in all, I'm just saying that, you know, I think the students and all kinds of people were mentors, but in a different way since I was so new to the state and just was really trying to lay down my tentacles all over the place best I could. So that's it.
Hearing Valerie mention ATVP, I would like to mention that the Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse really got its start during the time that I was director. When I started, we literally had no place to send women who came in to say that they were being beaten by a boyfriend or a husband or whoever. And so we sort of threw together a grant, and were able to hire a woman as director, a part-time director. And we, I guess, invented the name. I'm not quite sure where that came from. And it took off from there. And, you know, I think it's amazing. And I'm actually very proud of that work that we did, because it was clearly a needed resource.
Yes, thank you. My understanding is that ATVP started as a hotline in the Women's Center before it branched out into a full-fledged
Yeah.
victim services agency. Yeah, thank you. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and I have some questions from the audience that I would love to pose to you all. And I'll just put this out there for anyone to answer. The first question is from a former program coordinator at the Women's Center and former colleague of mine and Jeannie's, Amy Sharp, who is now the director of the WSU Women's Resource Center at Washington State University. And so Amy is wondering if there was historically a partnership with the Women's Center at WSU that any of you had connections to or engagement with, or helped to forge a relationship with the center.
I can
We
speak a
certainly
little bit to that. Oh, go ahead, Elaine.
we did during the time I was director. I think the most interesting thing that we did together during the time that the Washington State women brought their affirmative action lawsuit, which was sometime in the early 80s. Like, you know, that's a long time ago. But at any rate, the trial was going to be held in Colfax, which was the county seat. And the attorneys were staying in Pullman because they wanted access to their plaintiffs, and they needed automobiles to drive from Pullman to Colfax for the trial, because they didn't want to be spending money to rent. They didn't have those kinds of resources. And so we got a few people from the Women's Center at University of Idaho to loan their vehicles to the Pullman lawyers so that they could travel to Colfax for the trial, which was won. And it was one of the affirmative action wins that made a huge difference for women in athletics.
Wow, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing
was
that.
fun.
I didn't know that.
Yes, yeah,
That's to me.
that was one of the seminal lawsuits.
Amazing. Anyone else like to speak to that?
I remember during my time, I believe WSU had the Advance grant, which is an NSF grant to, as the name would suggest, advance women, mostly in STEM, but I think it extended across. And there was a piece of that allowed us to engage. And I think there was some cross, border collaboration that happened. The director at the time, Taria Irwin, always welcomed us over to WSU, and lots of great collaboration. And just we were always going back and forth because they had a great speaker and we wanted to hear them speak, or I don't know. I remember driving lots of times back and forth along that highway with you, Lisa. So
yeah, that's right. They had the Women's Summit. Remember, it's like a biannual summit that would convene groups of special interest groups, primarily to serve women, that would gather to meet twice a year. I seem to remember. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Heather. So Amy's other question is, what would be your hopes for the University of Idaho Women's Center for the future?
at least another 50 years.
Yeah, and its own building with it.
Yes.
You can have other programs and stuff. Yeah.
Am I
Donna,
mute?
go ahead.
Oh, good. I'm just being impressed here with how much has happened in
Yes.
only 50 years. It's such a long, long time ago to me that I had my little women's center. And I am touched and thrilled and excited to hear more about what's been going on. I've been remiss in not paying enough attention. 10 years ago, I came to the 40th anniversary gala, and that was pretty impressive. I had no idea, and I feel like just this old great granny who's very, very proud of her progeny. And I take absolutely no credit for it, but I'm really glad that we have had this university who, you know, who knew University of Idaho would have a women's center? It's the University of Idaho. But look at
Jenny
what
Wolf knew.
look at
Jenny
what
Wolf
has-
figured it out.
I am just stunned and delighted, and I thank you for all of you for doing what you've done for all the women that have come after us and will come after us. You've sown some really wonderful stuff. So congratulations, all of you.
Yes.
You know, also, I was thinking too about that there, as I was thinking about what I wanted to say, I was thinking what things did we do that worked, but then what things did we do that didn't work, you know, or that we did for a couple of years and then decided that that was not something that needed to happen anymore. And I was thinking, and Amy Sharp reminds me of the Step and Stroll competition that was just we filled up the entire Memorial Gym up and had a wonderful, amazing event with students from all over the inland Northwest, and it was really a neat event and stuff. And then I think you went then down to Boise or something. I can't remember, but you know, we tried a lot of things. You know, we tried working with the sororities and doing different things, trying to reach out and stuff like that. And some of that worked, and some of it was a little bit challenging. So nice to recall.
It occurred to me when I was thinking about doing this program, I was remembering imagining programs for the lunchtime brown bag programs and just making, you know, writing the descriptions. And I thought, we didn't have any computers then. You know, those years were pre-computer times, and it was so stunning to me to think back to the work that we did, you know, pre-electronic, because there was a lot and there was so much that was going on all of the time, and that was just our good old correcting Selectrics. So, I think that can help put into perspective what the years that have passed and how so many parts of the work that we do as administrators has changed.
Yeah, I had a thought along that line too, Elaine, that we didn't have computers. We did start a newsletter, women's newsletter that went out, Women's Center newsletter that went out regularly, but it was on mimeograph.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So in remembering some of those old newsletters, it was amazing that they got distributed, they got used, people came because of that.
Sometimes lots of people, yes.
Yeah, so it tickles me that.
Yep, we filled up the lounge sometimes.
Yep, for sure.
All right, we have 5 more minutes. I'm going to move to probably one more question. And Jean, this one is specifically for you. So an attendee says, I remember President Gibbs' lack of support of the Women's Center Could you add your perspective of the support that President Hartung provided to you in the center?
I believe President Hartung was very supportive. I know he was very supportive of the caucus that sued the university and led to the conciliation agreement. And while I don't ever remember him being in the Women's Center, he could have been, but I don't remember that. He was very supportive of what we were doing. And although he could have been more supportive in the way of getting us better furniture, but it is what it is. But
He could have put his money where his mouth was, maybe.
right. But yeah, I just remember him as being supportive.
I've heard from other folks who attended brown bag programs that he did attend brown bag programs in the center, and so that's astonishing. Our current president has not been to the Women's Center, so I think all of the others did come by at one point or another. All of the presidents that we've had since I've been there, but so here is a question from a former student activist, Melissa. She says, obviously you've all lived and worked through major historical movements. What tips could you give the rest of us to keep motivated to fight for things like abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, etc.?
Well, if we don't keep fighting, we'll just lose. I mean, I think that's, for me, that's sort of the bottom line, because for women and minorities, we'll never get anything if we don't fight for them. I think that's pretty clear from history.
And I think it's also really, we need to surround ourselves with people who are working on those same issues and who have, not only people who only have the same viewpoint, but who are exploring the issues and want to really understand how we can keep our activism strong and how we can keep active in the community and keep moving and pushing forward the things that matter to us. So I think it's a matter of keeping your network strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeannie. I think building coalitions and finding pockets of support wherever you can get them. And then I think the other thing I am continually worried about with student activists on my campus is about burnout and racial battle fatigue and just the continual trauma exposure. And so, we also need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of one another. We need to create sustainable activist movement so that we don't burn out, because the other side has all the energy in the world to wait us out. And so I think we just have to keep going, and that means taking care of ourselves, taking care of our health.
I agree. Yeah, as I hear frequently from folks who have been in this work for a long time, you can't draw from an empty well, right? You got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help others. And I think that will help to, caring for ourselves and ensuring that we're caring for those around us also will hopefully avoid, us burning out before the work ends. And goodness knows there's plenty of work still to be done, right?
Yeah. And that's I was just gonna say one last thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think these spaces are so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there spaces where people can come together and find that community of support and belonging and connection and like-mindedness or challenge, right? And so the Women's Center just holds a really special place in my heart, as it is really, I grew, I think, more from my experience there than I gave. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. We are at time, and I just want to offer my sincere gratitude to all of you for the work you did so tirelessly to position us in the place where we are now. We truly wouldn't be here without your work. And I know that, you helped to build a strong legacy for work moving into the future that, in a climate that perhaps wasn't always, for some of us, very open to this work. And it certainly feels like that sometimes now. But I want to offer in closing a final message from someone who was at the university for a very long time and in some senior leadership roles. He says, "You're all amazing pioneers. Your courage is inspirational. Thank you for your courageous leadership. Walk in My Shoes, the Vagina Monologues, and many other activities that you placed in my space on the U of I campus provided spaces and opportunities for many of us privileged white guys to pause and stop and consider women's daunting challenges in a stifling man's world. I love the new world that you have persevered to provide." Thank you, Steve. Thank you to all of our panelists tonight. This has been an amazing experience. I could quite happily sit and chat with you for the rest of the evening, but I know that we all have other things to move on to. So again, my sincere gratitude to all of you for your work in the center, for the programs and support and community that you built for our faculty, staff, and students, and also for being here tonight. Thank you so much to everyone who attended. We have recorded the webinar. We'll be editing it slightly and posting it on our website on our 50th anniversary webpage. So thank you all so much for being here. I encourage those of you who can to check out the other programs that we have coming up for our 50th anniversary. We have really packed it in this academic year. Lots of great stuff coming up. There's going to be another webinar next month, a kind of in-person hybrid webinar with a group of individuals who served as directors of our LGBTQA office. And then in November, we'll be having a panel with some former athletic directors and former and current student athletes talking about their experiences with Title IX and how that's supported them in pursuing their goals and athletics careers here at U of I. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah.
Nice to see familiar faces.